Hello and welcome to Business Now, your one-stop source for deep insights into our evolving financial landscape and the important topics. This week, we delve into food value chains and their struggle with market access, exploring how technology is boosting accessibility to the internet. We also bring you an exclusive with the top chief executive officer in the hospitality industry, plus plans to activate the commodities trade at the Uganda Securities Exchange. Stay tuned as we kick off Business Now in just over 20 minutes. So let's dive in.
The job of UTB is threefold. Number one is to market the country, to get tourists in and promote domestic tourism.
We want them to find out the options where women or everybody that is in production can have the simplest way to produce that nutritious food, and it is affordable.
We are just setting up a marketplace with a trading platform where any buyer or seller can come, get registered at the Securities Exchange, because right now it is the Securities Exchange that has created this platform.
But first, let's have a quick look at some of the stories making headlines in the business world. Oil prices 3% up, extending last week's losses as escalating trade tensions between the US and China stopped fears of a recession that would reduce demand for crude. Brent futures declined over $1 or 2.15% to $64 a barrel, while US West Texas Intermediate crude futures lost 1.35 cents US dollar and to close at $60 US. At the session, which was low, and benchmarks were down over 3% and hit their lowest levels since April 2021. Oil plunged 7% on Friday as China ramped up tariffs on US goods, escalating a trade war that has led investors to price in a higher probability of recession. So last week, Brent lost more than 10%, while the other dropped 10.6%. The International Air Transport Association has released its contactless travel directory to help quickly scale and increase adoption of contactless lens solutions. The directory will power a matchmaking service to help airlines identify and offer contactless travel at specific airports, including with their partner airlines. The contactless travel uses interoperable biometric solutions to enable travelers to move through the travel process without relying on paper documentation, such as passports or boarding passes. Parts of the travel process that could be made more efficient with contactless travel, including bag drop, lounge access, security screening, and boarding. In our CEO segment this week, Uganda's tourism sector is showing great promise and has beaten the after effects of the COVID-19 pandemic to register a 26% growth in visitor numbers. But there is one huge risk standing in the way: the flow of information online, where government alerts and disease outbreak and terror are a daily topic, causing losses as a result of cancellations from visitors. Ron Kawamara is the vice chairperson at the Uganda Tourism Board. He says government is changing the way it's doing things and has invested trillions to change the way we see our tourism industry. I want you to first talk to us about the state of affairs right now, because now that you are in that position as the Uganda Tourism Board, which doesn't often take a lot of credit for what they do, I don't know, for one reason or the other, now you're from the horse's mouth. What is the state of affairs in the tourism industry?
Well, I think the trends are looking upwards. If you look at 2019, when things collapsed, 2020 things collapsed, we had so much trouble. The country was locked down. But today we see now, starting from 2022, we grew immensely. 2023 grew 56% in the number of arrivals from the previous year. 2024 was remarkable. We were able to get close to $2 billion USD in addition to our FX. So tourism was the single biggest contributor to FX, foreign currency, in Uganda. It was employing close to 1 million people. It was making up 5% of our GDP. And so tourism now is on the upswing. But historically, we have not prioritized, invested in the tourism space. So despite tourism being the number one, import of FX into the country, we've invested very, very little. A good example was the last financial year where we invested maybe about $4 billion Uganda shillings into marketing the country. But we see those are changing. Government is now investing more. This year we have over 40 billion invested in marketing. We are going to encroach on markets that we've never advertised in. We'll be in Europe. We'll be advertising in Africa Cup of Nations. We'll be in North America. We're investing in the tourism products here in Uganda, making sure we're not just relying on nature or being gifted by nature. We want to be engineered and designed to compete and succeed. So you'll see us investing in more tourism products, marine tourism, iconic sites in the country, coffee tourism, and all kinds of tourist activities, marathons, events, activities. So historically, we have underinvested in this space. Any business that brings you $2 billion into the country, but is only getting $15 million, $10 million in investment, the ratio on the return on investment, that's an underinvestment. We have said that we have been able to grow immensely with very limited resource. This financial year, for example, we have already surpassed our pre-COVID numbers, and the year is not done yet. So it shows the appetite. Uganda is blessed, but Uganda must compete. Countries like Rwanda, like Kenya, Tanzania are spending 5 times, 10 times
Thank you very much.
more than we have. And they have better brand equity.
Global football team shirts.
Absolutely. And they have better brand equity for their countries, for their tourism products. So we're playing catch up.
I'm in touch with almost over 500 tour operators we've been working with missions abroad. For instance, the mission in Mombasa, to take tourists to Kenya and to see what Kenyans are doing in Kilifi, Watamu, Diani, and all that. The nice cottages, the way they do their tourism, the training of our people, to know that tourism is that important. Because if you invest all that money without actually switching people on, you enter a hotel and how are you treated by these people? Kenya has Kenya School of Government, and they train workers in the hospitality industry.
Yes.
They are really switched on. It starts with the people, by the way. So one thing that I want to ask you about is, besides that, the image of Uganda. There is a problem where you have government putting all this money, and you talked about the PS. It doesn't say 5 words without mentioning ATMs and the tourism and all that.
Yes.
And then you have 2 operators this side. The Ronis are investing in all these restaurants, cottages and hotels and etc. And then you have our friends who are supposed to make sure that the image of the country is protected. In other countries, something will happen in Rwanda, you will not know. Something will happen in Tanzania, you will know, but it will not be worse and all over the TV, and it will damage the image, and people will start saying, where am I going? What is this? There's too much tear gas and all that. You're shooting yourself in the foot.
Well, I think you raised a very important point.
So what are you doing as ETB and partners in government to make sure that the flow of information is controlled?
We have had a big problem of the flow of information. There's 3 ways where it has been a challenge. Well, Uganda lives in a very tough neighborhood. We have Congo, we have South Sudan. Any day that 1 or 2 ADF rebels crosses into the country, we find that the news now, ADF
I'm not talking about ADF.
No, I want to come.
External issues. And rarely do we have external issues really affecting us.
No, they do a lot.
I mean, how do we clean our house?
So let me first give you an example of where it's gone. Today, we have an advisory for Americans, Europeans, against going to Queen Elizabeth National Park. Why? Because UPDF releases statements saying rebels have crossed in. We've had actual attacks of tourists dying in Queen Elizabeth. That has been the single biggest hindrance for people coming in. Then we have the issue of diseases like Ebola. Ebola comes out, how we communicate Ebola. Tanzania gets similar attacks.
Prime Minister the other day.
Kenya, for example. Kenya has Al-Shabaab, which always on the border of Somalia attacks Kenyans. But you know how they do?
Flow of tourists.
But what they do, they communicate in Swahili. They don't put things in English. They don't write out statements anyhow. They're trying to protect their industry. Now,
give me a solution.
Now, another one, of course, is the politics you were telling, the tear gas.
The politics damaging tourism.
Of course.
And that's the sentiment coming out of tour operators. They're saying we are working hard, but the government is doing their
There's 2 things. I am an investor in tourism. Maybe 70% of my investment.
Feel concerned.
Absolutely.
That these things are happening.
When I see, for example, that the news is about Ebola, the news is about beating, the news is about it's bad. We have a task force now
How much does that damage rivals?
Oh, incredibly. If you talk to two operators,
Have you experienced cancellations yourself?
No, not myself, but people like Amos Wekesa and others.
No, not just Amos.
I'm saying like people like him.
100 people.
People like him, I use him because he's the leading person in that space. But people like him have lost millions of dollars this year because of the image of the country. Now, there's a solution. Government has created a task force that involves the private sector, the government ministries. They do two things. Number one is, okay, let's communicate better. When a crisis happens, let's discuss it in a way that does not threaten the tourists, it does not threaten the people who are coming to our country. Let's be very, very concerned about the image of the country.
On to agriculture now. Nutritious foods remain costly for smallholder farmers and women due to factors like poverty, gender inequality, limited access to resources, and market challenges, making it very difficult for them to afford a diverse and healthy diet. But why is it so in Uganda, East Africa's food basket? We talked to African Women Agribusiness Network Chief Joyce Atuhere on this growing problem and what the private sector is doing to change this trend. So I can see you play a very crucial role in the value chain, the agriculture value chain, and that value chain where we get food, and you focus on nutritious food. How does that high cost of nutritious food come about? And what are these nutritious foods that are becoming expensive?
Yeah, what I know that we have less people, producers of the nutritious food. Farmers are interested in producing just maize, just soybean, just matoke, but we have forgotten that we need, for the food on the table to be complete, we need both macro and micronutrients. And I know that we can achieve both micro and macro nutrients if we support women along the value chain, but we come in at least value addition. So what we are doing, we are making sure that at least women that are in value addition are intentional in producing nutritious foods. So we are working with women entrepreneurs that are at value addition level to influence the nutrition lens. Yeah.
So those women entrepreneurs, what exactly are you doing with them if we go to the farm?
Yeah, we are doing capacity building first from the farmer's side, production, so that we strengthen the contractual farming for those women that are in trade. So if we influence production at farm level, then those who are in value addition have the raw materials to produce nutritious products.
When you look at the market, we have the high cost of healthy options as compared to less healthy options. All right. What has been your observation, and what more needs to be done to make sure that we have more healthy options on the market, being accessible and affordable than less healthy options?
So here, I think it's what we are doing. We are doing collaboration, both with the researchers, the government, the development agencies. What we want researchers to do, we want them to find out the options where women or everybody that is in production can have the simplest way to produce that nutritious food, and it is affordable.
What do you see when you look at the prices of some of the healthy foods that we're talking about?
The healthy foods are not affordable. Unhealthy foods are affordable. In Chisenyi, they will think about posho, beans, and matoke. Then if you want greens, it will be just a spoon on the side. So I think the producers are not informed, the restaurants are not trained. There's lack of information in the whole space.
Over the past 3 years, bond yields to maturity have risen across all maturities, and experts have called this resilience, risk and opportunity. This signals increasing risk premiums demanded by investors, but are Ugandans participating? Well, we visited the global markets floor at Absa Bank and spoke to the head of markets, Catherine Chijagure, on the preface of government paper and how you can participate.
The Uganda shilling has remained stable, especially from October last year to date. We've traded within a range of around 36.20 to about 37.20. Some of the drivers that have enabled the shilling to remain strong, we continue to see healthy inflows from the commodity export sector, especially for coffee, cocoa, a bit of gold exports. And then more recently, we've also seen offshore investors who have come back to sell dollars and invest in government securities. That has also enabled the shilling to remain relatively strong. These inflows have been, of course, coupled with the demand from the usual sectors, manufacturing and energy sector, and also the central bank has been purchasing for their reserve build-up. However, the inflows have been able to balance this demand. We did have, of course, some of the Trump policies, the cuts in US aid, but however, because of the continued export inflows, we haven't yet seen a big impact on the currency itself. It's continued to trade within a stable range for this period. Yes.
Now, let's talk about you talk about yields being really so healthy for this market. Uganda's bond market is one of the most attractive, I think, in the region. And that, as you said, has helped the shilling to stay stable. And then people are watching you and they're saying, how do I even buy a bond?
Like you've rightly mentioned, government securities or treasury bills and bonds are good investments for customers looking for a good return. The minimum amount that one can invest is 100,000. So that means even for someone who has relatively low savings, they can still benefit from these government securities. What would a customer need? They would just approach their commercial bank. They would be requested to open up a central securities depository account with the central bank. Usually they'll fill a one-page form, provide a passport photo and their identification. And once they have this CSD account and their account, then they would start investing. Either they can participate through their bank and buy from the secondary market, or they can also fill a form. So when you look at where the yields are on the government securities at the moment, for example, the 1-year T-bill is at around 14.75. We have a 20-year bond that's trading between around 17% and 17.5. That's a very good return because in comparison to where inflation is below 4%, that means a client is able to get a good real return. The other thing that clients need to know that on these government securities, there is withholding tax on the interest. So for treasury bills, it's 20%, and for bonds below 10 years, 20%, and then for bonds 10 years and above, it's 10%. But when you compute all this, there's still a good real return.
So you have investors out there who are saying, well, where can I instead invest? Short-term, long-term, or even other investment vehicles?
Okay.
What advisory do you give them?
Okay, so usually the way we would advise our customers, because you have customers whose financial goal is to invest short-term. There are those who will do long-term. There are those who may want to take low risk, others high risk. So there are a number of asset classes within the Uganda financial markets that one can use. You can start with banks. We have savings accounts. There are high rate savings accounts that a client can invest in. Then there are fixed deposits. For the fixed deposits, of course, there's also some withholding tax of 15%. We do have the unit trusts that many of the fund managers are selling, and these earn a good interest above 10% for most of the fund managers. So that's also a good investment vehicle. We have the treasury bills and treasury bonds that we've spoken about. Then when you move to the capital markets, we have equities. We have companies that are listed on the Uganda Securities Exchange. These are usually for long-term investors because the performance of a stock depends on the performance of the company.
But that's not enough. You know, after decades of trying establishing a commodities exchange, the private sector, such as the Grain Council of Uganda, feels that now is the time to take action and start an important mission to trade Uganda's grain on the stock market and enable access to markets and capital for farmers.
We are just setting up a marketplace with a trading platform where any buyer or seller can come, get registered at the Securities Exchange, because right now it is the Securities Exchange that has created this platform. And tomorrow we'll be launching the specific dynamics of how this thing operates. But as you said, to make it simple, it is an environment where you can go, get a registration, so you get an account number, like if you wanted to buy shares on a listed, Airtel or this, the same process. So you get an account, and then you attach to a broker, and then basically you can trade the commodities. The Grain Council has put in place several regional warehouses, which will act as hubs, which will collect produce from qualifying investors. Now, the
Investors are farmers in this
the
case.
farmers
All
and
right.
also the buyers. So there is a minimal quality, a minimum quantity, which is a lot. So it has to be about 5 metric tons, which is about 5,000 kilos, which is why we encourage the farmers to come together as groups. So cooperatives come to the exchange, list, and then you can get a number that allows you to start trading. The environment, the infrastructure, the trading systems, the platforms, everything is in place. And in fact, we are already we are piloting at 3 places already. And the feedback is giving us sufficient confidence to go out tomorrow and say, look, we are ready to do this for several commodities, including coffee, cotton, paddy rice. We are looking at beans, and we are looking at maize as well. So we are trying to formalize the trade in commodities. 90% of our trade, Malcolm, is informally traded. Means there are no contracts, there's no guarantee of payment by people who are selling, so there's a lot of credit, there's a lot of buying qualities that are not differentiated. So what the commodity exchange is trying to adopt is a structured trading system that involves everybody in the trading ecosystem.
Next week on Business Now, we'll bring you the very latest in Uganda's oil and gas sector and the journey towards its commercialization. You follow us on our social media platforms and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more updates.